Invincible is the most outrageously violent TV show on the internet. It feels like a confession from the creators. Hi everybody, I am turned on by torture. I decided to make a game out of the most disturbing scene, which somehow isn't when a father beats his own son to the brink of death. But I made the game silly because I needed eye bleach after all of the blood and dismemberment that the show made me watch. I knew I wanted everything in the game to ragdoll because ragdolls make everything better, but I had no idea how to set up ragdolls. So I started with something I knew, like setting up a new Unity project with a legally distinct parody name, Invincible the game, instead of... Then I set up a controller to let you walk and fly around using the same asset that I made use of in my omni-man game. Hey Bjorn, you know the Aang model you made that looked like a deformed mannequin that survived a nuclear disaster?
Yes, sir.
Let's do that again, but on purpose for the Invincible models.
Yes, sir.
Bjorn started working on the Invincible model, and I got back to working on the game. I wanted to make the environment as fragile and destroyable as my sexuality when I see Ryan Reynolds, so I reused and copy-pasted the code for destruction from my Omni-Man game, which was all about destroying the city. To learn how to do ragdolls, I followed this tutorial, and by follow, I mean I copied their code, and I don't understand it, but it works. Unity basically has built-in ragdolls with a really easy GUI window that pops up and lets you set them up. So I really didn't even end up needing the tutorial, but they had a convenient script that I copied that lets you turn on and off the ragdolls, which would be useful later on, basically. In the meantime, Bjorn finished modeling Invincible, and he was looking like an angry toddler, as he does. If you agree, make sure to subscribe. If you don't subscribe, I will be deleting your Fortnite account. I'm sorry. I needed a combat system for the game, so I started programming it. In the first version of combat, there was only one enemy for testing, so I had you automatically lock onto that enemy, zoom into them, and start attacking them, all with one click. No aiming required. But to prepare combat for the final version of the game, where there'd be more than one enemy, I created a new method that detects enemies around you, and then selects the enemy that's closest to you, and then zooms into that enemy.
And when they find it, they'll destroy it.
Basically requiring you to be close enough to an enemy before you left click, instead of just automatically going to the enemy from wherever you are. Now, let's make use of the ragdolls, and after you attack the enemy, let's make the enemy ragdoll. I know the animations look bad right now, and that's totally intentional because I'm going to hide them with VFX. So I import a VFX pack that I always use to improve the impact of the attacks and hide all of the ugly. The tack VFX is hiding imperfections in the game, just like Photoshop can help you hide imperfections in your dating profiles pics. Bjorn redid the old Omni-Man model to fit in with this new scene, and I started working on the AI for the enemy in the game. Basically building out a state machine which lets it go into the state of ragdoll or idle animated. The code I copied earlier in the tutorial was allowing me to reset the enemy from being ragdolled back to the idle animation state, but after punching the enemy and sending them off flying in ragdoll, they weren't just resetting to idle animation, they were also resetting to their original position. So I finally looked at the code that I had copied earlier and made adjustments to ensure the enemy follows the ragdoll's adjusted position, as the ragdoll actually has a separate position from the base enemy, so I needed to align them in code. And now, voila, the enemy goes flying and doesn't reset. Bjorn also finished modeling the Viltrumites, and those models will later replace these placeholder enemies. To make the transition smoother from ragdoll to animated state, then a baby polar bear sliding down a rainbow into a pot of gold, I took two animations for standing up from back and front. Then I wrote some more code to detect if it was lying on its front or back, and played the appropriate animation to make it seem like it was smoothly getting up. After spending all this time making things to let you beat up the enemy AI, I figured it was only fair for me to start working on letting the AI fight back. So first, I made the AI actually move towards you, the player. But for some reason, it was clipping in the ground. Let's just ignore this problem for right now, though, as Bjorn finished modeling the environment. Now, while the enemy is still clipping through the ground, let's actually create an attack for the enemy so that they can move to the player and then attack them. So I set up a ragdoll for the player, programmed an attack for the enemy, and states for the player so that they can transition into ragdoll and back to animate, just like the enemy. Most of the gameplay was done at this point, but the game was still looking as unrelated to Invincible as a white girl at Starbucks, and just as basic. So it was finally time to start implementing and adding all of the art that Bjorn has been making. The Invincible game is done and sufficiently silly, and you can click a video right now to watch how I made an Omni-Man game where you destroy an entire city.